Welcome to the Pestle, reviewing and breaking down movies to look for insights into the movie-making process. Hosted by Drugs. There's no problem that a little coke and pop rocks can't solve. Let's dim the lights and start the show.
Welcome everybody to the Pestle. Today's show is brought to you by Hey There, the shine of a cow bottled for your skin. Lotion your hide with Hey There. Welcome everyone to the Pestle. I am Wes.
And I am Todd. That was the best one in a long time.
It's fun trying to come up with like catchphrases for make-believe products.
After 308 episodes,
Crack the
you're getting
code.
real creative here, man.
Welcome everyone to the Pestle. We're filmmakers. We like to dive into story and analysis and see what we can learn about the filmmaking process. This is going to be a fun one. I think it's an interesting thing to, I think, be behind and in front of the camera and kind of work through all the phases of production, because there's so much that goes into it. And some of those things I've got more experience than others. Like there's certain aspects of filmmaking that I've done for myself, but I haven't done at the highest level, obviously. But for instance, I do visual effects, for some of my projects here and there, and that's fun. I know how that works. I know, what to do, and how to make it work in my final project. And I color my projects, and I don't go overboard because that's by far my weakest, spot as a filmmaker, like who does it all, the one-man band type, hands in all the pots. And so for our last project, a short film called Trauma Minds, I spent a lot of money on this thing. And part of the final process was getting a colorist. And I reached out to a local color house or post house that does coloring and a bunch of other post-production services, editing, VFX and whatnot. And so I reached out to them. I was like, here's the deal. Like, I don't have a lot of money left in my budget, but I wanted to see what kind of rate, y'all charge for coloring. We had a quick back and forth. What's the film? Send me a link to your film. What's the runtime? What's the format, capture format? And what's your budget? What can you afford? And I was like, okay, again, I don't know what's reasonable or not, but here's what I can do. And I gave them a range, and they were like, great, we'll take the exact upper limit of your range and work from there. And it was a really interesting process of going through that whole workflow, because I've done like turnovers for sound, like for sound mixing. And that's pretty obvious to me. I don't know. I did the similar things whenever I'm doing it for myself. So getting prepped for a sound turnover is very much similar. You're lining up all your audio, right? And trying to lay it out in a way that makes sense for your mixer so that they know, here's where all the music is and these, 5 tracks, and here's 5 tracks for all your sound effects, and here's 5 tracks for all your audio. And then I try to go a step above that. And because whenever you export for someone's like Pro Tools, you're using usually like an AF file, and they do not retain almost any data of what you did in your edit. Like it's kind of brute force, like, oh, you want all these files? Here's all these files. It's like, yeah, but I keyframed this, and I had a fade here, and this crossfaded, and they don't give a crap about any of that. And so to help offset some of that, like you put together notes and say, here's what I'm doing here on this track, and here's what's happening in this track. And then I might even go step above that and like, here's all my booms, here's all my lavs. And then my boom is 2 tracks. Here's what's enabled on my edit, and here's what's disabled, so that they can see exactly which audio sources I'm using for the edit that they're looking at. And then from there, they have almost everything they need. They might have a question, blah, blah, blah. And so for sound, for color, it's not too dissimilar from that. It's like laying out everything and then stripping everything, because they don't want your crappy temp, color, and they don't want all your transitions, and they want to get all the highest quality source files. We shot on a Arri Alexa 35, and you have so much flexibility with those files. We didn't shoot raw. That's just a crazy amount of data that we just don't need. I don't need. Certainly not for, a short film. If this were a Disney Marvel superhero ninja project, sure, like you're probably going to want all that data. But
can you specify really quickly when you say raw, like what's the benefit of shooting raw as opposed to 4K?
Sure. So RE RAW, I don't know how this works in necessarily all camera systems, but with RE, it's capturing all the data that's hitting the sensor. So if you've ever taken a picture, you set your exposure up, right? Like, okay, I'm going to shoot at 24 frames a second and I'm going to, make sure I don't blow out my highlights. And so I'm going to maybe put some ND filter on and I'm going to set my f-stop to this, and I'm going to set my ISO, which is the sensitivity of how your sensor's kind of interpreting the light hitting the sensor. It's really dark outside, so I need a really sensitive sensor right now. And so I'm going to set it to 12,000 ISO, right? You want to capture and bring in be as sensitive to light as possible. Well, the nice thing with RE RAW is you can make some of those decisions later in post. You can set your ISO to whatever, later down the line. But in order to do that, you are capturing an outrageous amount of information. And it's just terabytes and terabytes of data. And for us, like shooting a short, we'll bake in some of the look. Like that's kind of the thing, right? We'll bake in some of the look into the files, and that's fine. And so the colorist gets all these log files, which you call log, which is kind of a flat, neutral profile. And you go through your edit, you make your edit and everything, and you're locked, what you call picture lock, and then they give you a bunch of notes. And this was really useful. I am not interested in faking the funk. Like I try to be honest on the show when it's like, I don't know. Like I try to say I don't know if I don't know. And if I'm going to make a guess, I'll try to say I'm guessing and not try to put people on like I'm freaking Spielberg over here. Just know the ins and outs of every camera. I'm Fincher, right? I think someone twisted the aperture a fraction of a degree. Like this is off, the light's off. I'm like, what? And so talking to the colorist, I was just like, from the beginning, when I was talking to the producer, I was like, hey, I don't know. I've never done a color turnover, so feel free to give me as much information as you need and to correct me if I say something stupid. Like, let me know because I don't know. I want to be upfront about what I don't know, which is everything. I don't know how y'all do things, how this process works. This is my first time. Be gentle. And so whenever I got into the color room, I did the same thing. I told him from the beginning of the 3-hour session that we had, this is my first time in here. I don't know like what is smart and what's dumb. If I say something dumb, let me know. That's okay. Like I'm okay with that. Like I'm here to learn just as much as I'm here to get a good product. And so you go through this whole process of collapsing all your video tracks, beforehand, way beforehand, like part of the prep. And they gave me a checklist of here's everything we're going to want from you. And it's a PDF file that they probably send to every single project just to make sure, even if they've worked with you probably 1,000 times, here's the latest specs that we're using. Just good practice, right? And so they give you a list of here's everything we want, like collapse all your tracks as far down as you can. If you have any titles, like render those out in like a TIFF or, and then on top of that, give us your fonts, whatever you're using, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, because you don't want to color the title.
Correct.
Too.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And so you're kind of working through this whole process. And then you hand off your hard drive and then they're going to go through all the stuff that they asked you for and prep it ahead of time. And I paid like a fraction of their full charge. Like I think they just had space in their agenda in their calendar, but we originally talking and they're like, yeah, when are you wanting this? And I was like, I'd love to have it by the end of November. And they're like, okay, well, if you have a little bit more flexibility in your schedule, maybe, we could get to this in like the first week or two of December. And I was like, okay, cool. And just to back out for a second here, my number one priority was actually making my cinematographer happy. Like he put a lot of, elbow grease into this thing. He brought the camera team together and the G&E team. They were all off his recommendation. So that's producer labor, which I gave him a credit for. But then he also had cut a really great rate. Like I paid him for a little bit here and there, but then he also worked for free, like I got a really good deal, and we're friends. Like we've worked together before. But he's a busy guy. He gets really nice projects. He owns Aries and Alexas and, a ton of stuff. Like he's done some really cool projects, before. Anyway. So my priority was to make sure he's happy because, one, I want to work with him more in the future. This was my co-director when we made Threads way back in the day. And so it was really fun to be on set with him, after a spell. We've done one or two other projects since then, but, I wanted to make sure he was happy so that he would show my work off to other people. I want him playing it on his Instagram on loops, and putting it in his reel, and just really, really excited about it. Cause then I know I've at least hit a minimum benchmark of, professionalism that is going to play well with other audiences as well. So if I kind of can just do some of this stuff, I know these metrics in my head are going to be good. I got someone who's going to be excited to work with me again because I looked out for him. And I'm going to have a good product. I can't really lose. Even if it's not exactly what I envisioned in my head, I can take those lumps because I'm making my creative partner happy. That's a good thing. And that's exactly what happened. Like he's super happy with it. The look is slightly different from what I had in my head, but it still looks good. I'm not like upset. It looks great.
I think it looks fantastic. I mean, I've seen color, before and after before, and this is one of the best, like, it's one of the best uses of color to tell the story that I've seen, in a really long time. And it's really easy to tell because I've spent so much time with it pre-color, and now seeing it colored, it's especially, at the end, like, when you have this moment at the end, it's like super, if you see it beforehand and then see it after, then you can really tell, how effective it is. So great.
Night and
so
day.
Great.
Because we had a pre-production call, that I got to sit down with my colorist, and say, here's the things that I'm wanting. Here's our references. Here's what's in my head. Here's kind of the direction we're going. And I really only walked in with a few notes. And one of them was like, there's a shot here that this object is being kind of washed out, and I really need you to bring that out if you can. And then there's another shot, with one of our actors, and the makeup wasn't quite there. We have a corpse, in the film, and we were working all the way up until we rolled camera, and we just couldn't get it there. And so I need your help to put me over the top. Cause right now I'm super unhappy with it, and it's frustrating me, and it's upsetting. Like I'm actually just physically ill because of how upset I am over this thing. And he was like, okay, yeah, cool. I was like, all right, well, okay, good deal. And then we get into the room, and they've conformed everything. And it's one of those other things that I gave them basically a 2K project file, and they upgraded it to a 4K. We shot in like a 4 or 5K format, but I was using a lot of punch-ins, and I was like, I don't know how well this is going to hold up. And so I'm just going to downsample to a 2K image. And they were like, no, we're going to bump it up to a 4K. It'll be fine. I was like, great. That's awesome. First of all, I didn't even ask them to do that, and they did it anyway. And then we get into the room, and I'm already kind of freaked out because of how far away they are from the idea that I was giving them. And I was like panicking a little bit of, how do I not be rude about where we are versus where I want to be? And I was like, yeah, okay. Like, here's this. And my DP gets in, a few minutes late, traffic. And he starts talking, and hearing that was such a cool process for me, because it's easy for me to talk sound and talk visual effects and talk cinematography. But talking color, my library, my vocabulary, isn't very strong because I don't have a huge, experience of going through that process. Like I've been on set shooting things, I don't know, 1,000 times. I don't even know anymore. And so I know how to communicate a camera move to a very specific degree. Like how to reference panning versus tilting versus booming versus sliding, or dollying. All those things are, I understand, like opening or closing the aperture and how that's going to impact the image, what hazing the room is going to do to my image. All those things I understand, but I don't know necessarily what I should and shouldn't be expecting out of a colorist in the room on the day. I know what they can do. I don't know how long it takes to do those things, and therefore whether or not it's a reasonable ask. Because I've been in DaVinci Resolve for the last 10 years, off and on. I don't spend a lot of time, and that's something after this project I'm definitely going to do more, just to get more of those reps in, so that when I'm in the room, I know what's reasonable to ask and what isn't. But just being there, and first off, he knocked out my two big issues before I even was there, right? We sat down, and every time I saw some of these moments, I was like, God, that looks good. And I was just so excited. But then having, Andrew there and kind of working through like, oh, let's do this. And I was like, okay, so like a quick tracking isn't that hard. A masking isn't that hard. And he started doing things that really shouldn't even be on his plate. Like he did a visual effects comp that I didn't think would be a reasonable thing to ask at all. And we got to this moment. I had to build a website for the story. There's a moment where my character goes to a news article, and I wanted that to look good on screen. And I hate green screen. I just always have. I've always thought in camera is better. I didn't need Christopher Nolan to tell me that. Like most of us don't. Like we know in camera just looks better. And so I didn't want to green screen the cell phone and do all that in post. And then it doesn't quite line up with their finger movements. And then because they don't even know what they're supposed to be tapping on, they got nothing to look at. And I didn't want to make a JPEG, and that just kind of looks crummy. So I just built a website. And when she lands on the homepage of the website, there's a news article that I had a typo on, and there's a reason for that. Is I won't get into it. It's mildly interesting, I guess, but for speed's sake. And there was a typo, and no one had noticed it yet except me, and it was one of those things that is just always going to bother me. And I was like, yeah, it bums me out. Like I would have fixed it myself if I wasn't getting a colorist, because I didn't know what was going to screw up the color session. Like if I start doing composites, and then he gets in there to start manipulating color, and then suddenly he applies a little contrast and it starts revealing the cracks in my VFX. That's humiliating, and it could wreck the color session, and I just didn't want that. And so I took a big step back and was like, I will live with this and just hope that people aren't scrubbing which they won't, right? But he was like, yeah, give me 2 minutes. And he took 2 or 3 minutes, and he did a little quick composite and fixed my little typo. And I was like, well, that was unexpected, but thank you. That's huge. Anyway, it was a really fun 3-hour session, and I was really excited just about going through that process and seeing what's possible in the room. And that's part of the game, man. We're always looking at what you can improve and learn, no matter what you're doing. And I think if anyone takes anything away from that ramble, it's don't be afraid to say, I don't know, when you don't know, because you will be spotted if you pretend to know when you don't know.
Great point.
Don't fake it. Don't fake it. Come on.
Yeah. One of the coolest things that I heard, just as a comparison in the music world, was Sting was being interviewed years ago about his great music, his great songs that he's written over the years or whatever, and great performances. And one of the things he said was that I'm only great because I allow the people around me to be great, to be the people that are better than me to be great. I mean, he played, because the people that he played with are like some of the best musicians on the planet that have ever existed. Vinnie Colaiuta is one of the greatest drummers to ever play the drum kit. And he played with Sting for 20 years or whatever on all of his albums, 10 Sumner Tales, everything. He said, I'm only good because I allow them to do their thing, right? I don't pretend to know how to tell Vinnie Colaiuta how to play his drums. That's not what I do. What I do is I write the songs and then come in, and then the palette is expanded because I have these great people around me. It's the same thing with your color, with your, picking the DP. You have a vision, and it needs to align with that vision as much as possible. But at the same time, at the end of the day, it could be better by allowing people who know what they're doing in a different capacity to do what they do best. And it sounds like that's exactly what you did. And I love that your biggest concern here was making sure that your DP was happy with it as well. I mean, we make stuff and we want it to be exactly what's in our head, but at the same time, what's in our head also needs to appeal to people around us, right? And we need to bring people into the process that we want to like it, that we want to put it out there as well. I think that's brilliant, and it's thoughtful, and to make sure that Andrew, who had put a lot into it as well, really liked it too, including him in the color session in general. I don't know that that's always done. I think that's pretty cool that you did that. So yeah, thanks for the insight there. I've been on one color session, but it was like a long time ago, and it was amazing watching it. And it was just for like this little small thing that I did for my old job. So I can only imagine what it felt like to have it be your project that you've sunk so much money and time and effort and love into, and watching it come to life. One question, when you walked in and you realized, okay, this isn't exactly what I wanted, and I'm kind of nervous, and then Andrew showed up, did he kind of like take the reins in the conversation, as in like instigating the conversation to ask the specific questions, or how did that happen?
A bit, because he and I had a conversation beforehand. They sent us a temp color that we could review a day or so before the session itself. And so I got to take a look at it and have my freak out, and then send it over to him. And we had a quick conversation on the call, and he was seeing something slightly different than I was. And I was like, it's just skewing on my laptop anyway, which is not, calibrated, for color. I was just seeing it just looked very like teal and orange. And I was like, that's not at all, what I was going for, or what I had in my head. And he was like, yeah. And then we get into the room, and it's actually more brown, like on the more calibrated monitor, it's actually a little bit more brown than orange. And so that was a bit of a trick from my laptop, that was playing on me. But the first thing he asked was like, do you have True Tone on? And I was like, no, because I have a MacBook. I was like, no. He was like, oh, okay. Well, a lot of times people get messed up because True Tone really screws with your image. I was like, yeah, I turned that thing off the minute, I got it. But we were able to start talking through, here's what I was thinking, and, here's what I want to move away from. And so he was already armed with what I was actually wanting. And then he's able to kind of mix that in with what he was wanting as well. And so I always felt protected that he had my best look and interest as well. He wasn't just him for him's sake. But then he had sent over, right after we shot, he did a quick look on his like iPhone. He was like, here's what I'm thinking. And I saw it, and I was like, yeah. This is exactly what I'm going for. And I'd shared that, in the pre-production call with, the color house. And I don't know. I think just going through the process, maybe lost it as a reference, or maybe had a junior member kind of go through and do a first pass and clean everything up. But in the room, whenever it still wasn't feeling right, I was like, let me just pull up this reference again. And I was like, here's what I was seeing. Andrew, this is your first pass that you gave me, and I really love it. And this is what I've had in my head. So if you want to use this as a reference, cool. If not, cool. He grabbed it. He was like, oh, yeah. And so he just went over and shared it with the colorist. And it was like, this is what we were thinking. And from that moment on, we were 90% of the way home. And it was just a lot of fine tuning shots. Like, okay, maybe we can fix this shot. Yeah, this is a little washed. How can we give this a little bit more dynamism in the frame? And then it was just fine tuning shot to shot and super easy. Like most of the day of those 3 hours was just Andrew and I and Brandon, Tomas, the colorist, just kind of shooting shit while Brandon's over there just flying. Like, I don't know if it was the Fairlight, but he had some kind of, physical board that he's going through. And it was mind bending. That was the feeling I think my clients have when they watch me edit. because my fingers kind of fly around the keyboard because I'm not even thinking about my fingers. I'm thinking about what I want in my edit, and my fingers just do it. It's kind of like if you're a touch typer, you don't think about THE, you just like your fingers hit the word, say your fingers say the for you, and that's it, right? And so for him, that's what it was happening. It was just like, oh yeah, power window that, track that, and oh yeah, we can. And it was just so cool to see like the proficiency, so that the ideas are what he's thinking. He's not thinking, let me do this thing. He's thinking, and therefore let me hit these keys and these strokes and, pan over here. It was just, I want to execute this idea, and his hands were just doing it for him. And that's
amazing. I've seen those boards. They're so cool.
Yeah.
There's something so cool about that. You get immediate feedback. You get immediate, fulfillment, when you have this shot and you're looking at it and you're okay, I'm going to put this power window here and I'm going to saturate the rest of it, and I'm going to build out, it's just and then all of a sudden the scene, and then you do a before and after, and it takes 5-10 minutes or whatever, or you watch these guys and it takes 5 minutes to do. It's so satisfying, I think, It
is. So, and working with him was so great, just because no ego whatsoever. It was all about, what do you want? You're not going to hurt my feelings. Just, call it out. If you see something, if you want to change something, you want to try something, it's cool. Let me know. And the more that process kind of went on, the more I could see he really was open. And that's just kind of the result of working on the high level projects. I mean, they colored the last big Rihanna hit, whatever that was. And movies that hit theaters and Netflix, and we've all watched their work before. Let me just say that. And it's like the result of being at the top of your game is just being open and not taking it personally, the whole creative process. Like, I'm going to take a crack at it, but if it's not working, man, cool. Let me know. We can do that. And that's a hard place to get to as a creative, because you have to kind of let your mind relax so that you can both be creative and take some shots, and also not take it and not be so vulnerable that your feelings get hurt and you shut down whenever those shots don't work out. That's a delicate balance to strike, and he was just an absolute pro, and I'd highly recommend. It was TBD Post is who I used, and so I'll put him in the show notes. And if you're looking for someone to do some post work for you, hit him up. You never know. They can do remote sessions. If you're not local, they can do all of this remotely. You don't have to be in the room with them. And so I highly recommend them. They did me a solid, and it might take time. Maybe you don't have, $20,000 to sink into color. But just reach out, hey, I have $5,000. What can you do? Maybe, you just might have to be a little bit more patient. Nice. Speaking of cool colors, what are we covering today, man?
Oh man, today we are covering Limitless. I think it's from 2011, Bradley Cooper film. If you haven't seen this film, please pause the episode and go watch it, because we're going to spoil all the things. At the time of this recording, I believe it's streaming on Peacock. So
nice, very nice. We'll dive into many things. Definitely look at some of the story and writing. Talk about the opening scene and just generally how opening scenes work. Touch on some of the voiceover, the structure of the film, exposition. And also, you can't talk about this movie without talking about cinematography. They use inserts for storytelling at one point that I thought was cool. Color for storytelling. And we'll also talk about how the voiceover impacted the coverage that they had to get, and other such stuff and things and stuff.
And a quick synopsis of the film. A deadbeat in New York City takes a mysterious pill that unlocks all of his brain's ability and transforms him from a struggling writer into a financial wizard. But it also puts him in a new world with many dangers. It's directed by Neil Berger, screenplay by Leslie Dixon, based on the novel by Alan Glynn, cinematography by Joe Willems, featuring Bradley Cooper as Eddie Morra, Robert De Niro as Carl Van Loon, Abbie Cornish as Lindy, Andrew Howard as Gennady, the gangster, Tomas Arana as the man Man in the Tan Coat, the henchman, and Anna Friel as Melissa.
This is an exclusive product. It's coming on stream next year. They've had clinical trials and it's FDA approved.
All right, just out of curiosity, and that's all.
Let's see it. What's in it?
They've identified these receptors in the brain that activate specific circuits. And you know how they say that we can only access 20% of our brain? Well, what this does, it lets you access all of it.
Vern, look at me. Do I look good to you? I'm broke and I'm depressed off my ass. I don't think that my life's gonna take some sudden upswing into fame and fortune by taking some shiny branded designer drug.
Okay, Todd. Magic pill that gives us 100% access to our brain.
I want that.
Yeah. Whatever that means, because I think we all have full access to our brains. But silly science aside, is this a fun movie?
So much fun. So much fun. You last week we had a few choices of different films to cover, and I picked this one like right off the bat because I just remember really liking this. It's so much fun just to explore the possibilities of this, and anytime I get to see Bradley Cooper, in a leading role like this is just great. Yeah, so the cinematography is fantastic. I mean, it opening with that fractal zoom thing coming from going down to the street and then through the street, and they did that practically. I mean, obviously it's multiple shots that they tied together with VFX, but they went out and shot all of these things, and from what I remember, they used wide angles, like wide angle lenses, but 3 different ones. So like a shorter, a medium, and a long one, and then they would tie them together. They even, I think, mounted cameras on taxis and stuff through the city, and they do this throughout the film. I think there's multiple shots, multiple versions of this, and it's just so smart how they did it. Not just that, but also his time skips, or his mental skips, how they, you'll see him and then the camera will move around him and all of a sudden he's in the hallway or something. How cool, what a great way to show us a mental skip and what he experiences. Like, I felt the mental skip as well, because I was part of it. I watched it happen, and it seemed to me like that was his experience as well. His experience was he just kind of turns and now he's in the hallway and it's 8 hours later. I think that was just brilliant. I love his progression, and the fact that this is a drug, right? So coming off of it would be painful. It's not just, oh, I don't have it anymore, so I don't have full access to my brain anymore. No, it's like any normal, hardcore drug. If you come off of it, it's very painful. It's very, you have withdrawal. I love that they made that a centerpiece of the story, that he needs this now, because then at the end, when he doesn't need it anymore, and not only does he not need it, but he can basically see the future, because he's become so smart that he's been able to what was it? He's been able to either create a new thing that has been infused into his DNA, so now it is part of him, so now he doesn't need to take it, or something like that. Yeah,
he was saying that he's been taking it so long and he's tapered off so well that it just became a part of him.
Yeah. What a great twist at the end there, I just think that's so cool. And I also was thinking, okay, if I had access to 100% of my brain, which, I agree with you. I think we use 100% of our brain now. But I think what that means is that all the synapses fire at the same time or whatever, maybe. I don't know. Maybe that's what they mean, because, me talking to you, I'm using one portion of my brain, but I'm not using another portion at the same time. So maybe that's what they're talking about, is just using all of your brain all of the time, which sounds really freaking intense and scary. I don't know that I would want that. But I was thinking, okay, if I was able to do that, you know, story wise, is there a better version of for a story like this than making money off trading? You know, and then I thought, after thinking about it for a while, no, actually that's really smart, because you can make it quickly, you make it legally, and there's no cap to the amount of money that you could make, you know, in a day. You know, you could make $2 million in a week or whatever, like he does. So I think that was actually a really smart move to do that, because then, you know, he's not doing anything nefarious. He's doing something that everybody does all the time, and just way better. And not only that, he's doing something that you and I wish that we could do as well. Does that make sense? So,
Yeah.
you know, Joe Schmo over here, it uses $100 and he makes $2,000 in a single day. You know, I use $100 and I lose it. Like but it's legal. Both ways
Right.
are legal. And so they're putting him up against the best in the business who have been doing it for their whole lives, basically 20 years, and he is destroying them. That's a great way to visually see the capacity that this drug has, right? Yes, he could maybe go off and cure cancer, but you and I, we can't do that. Like we're not in that world. We can't dip our toe into cancer curing, you know, into like, you know, drug making. So, but we can into trading. And so we instantly relate to that, and we instantly wish that we had this pill so we could do that same thing, right?
That's a great point.
Because it's not seeing the future. It's him using his brain and his smarts to see trends and to capitalize off of that. And they say that multiple times in the film.
That's a good point about, like, yeah, he can't dip his toe into medicine. That's like a 15-year endeavor or whatever. Like, there's no quick way to get around that. But yeah, it's exciting to watch him fly around the world and make a bunch of money and see an obvious. And they do such a good job of setting up him as this kind of poor, broke, dumb, and sloppy, right? And just living in the worst place, and seeing that contrast of see his life coming together, and suddenly give him a haircut, shave, and, you know, color, and then put him in airplanes and all these things that he would obviously never have access to as a broke writer who can't pay his rent. Like, they set up the contrast so perfectly that there's nowhere to go but up.
Well, and all of it happens really quickly.
Mm-hmm. They don't waste any time. Yeah.
Zero time. I mean, we start with him on the ledge about to kill himself, and then we go back in time. That's, you know, it's a great story arc thing there. We go back in time, and then we end up where we left off, and then we see what happens afterwards. So it's like a hook, and then we want to see what happens. So, but we set up that he's a broke loser who is a writer who's not doing well. His girlfriend dumps him, and then he runs into his ex-brother-in-law who gives him the drug. I mean, that's within 10, 15 minutes, right? I don't know. I need to go look at the timestamps, but it was very quick. If it's 20, it feels like a very fast 20. I'll say that. It's all this stuff happens really quickly, which is great for a movie like this. It's got to hook you, give you a reason to keep watching, give you tell you who is important in the story, and then something needs to happen.
10 minutes to get to the conversation with his ex-brother-in-law.
Come on. 10 minutes. That's incredible. We're not wasting time. Like, we know I'm a smart viewer. I know he's a loser. I know that he is failing at life. I know that he is having a lot of issues. In fact, one of the big issues is he can't pay rent. We don't even find out about that until after he's taken the pill, right? First we find out that he can't pay his rent while he's right after he took the pill, and so he has this interaction with his landlord's wife, which shows us what the pill can do instantly.
Which they set up perfectly. We don't even need, and it's so well structured because we believe he can't pay rent because he couldn't even pay the bill at the diner that his
the
girlfriend
diner.
paid for. So it's like,
She
of
said
course
bank,
it tracks.
and she puts her card down. Yeah.
Which is a great burn.
It's just so great. And then instantly, and then I love that it's his landlord's wife, because what happens? He seduces her because he can use all of his brain, and it's just instantly we know the capability of this pill. It could have easily been his landlord, but no, it was his landlord's wife. And now we can see the capacity that he has now.
And it's such a classic use of guys discovering new technology to use it immediately for sex. Like the first thing I'm going to use this thing for is getting laid. That's perfect logic. I buy that all the way.
100%. But, and we don't hate him. We don't hate him for it because his girlfriend's already just broke up with him.
True.
You know, it's not like he's doing this behind her back. Like she dumped him. So and I think that Bradley Cooper is fantastic in this role. You know, I'm a big fan of his. I have been for a long time. I don't think I dislike anything he's been in. Honestly, I think him on screen is a lot of fun to watch and to look at. Him across from De Niro is fantastic. I love De Niro in the role as well. And so anyway, all in all, a lot of fun, great acting. Cinematography is great. I'm excited to hear what you want to talk about in that regard. The story arc is great. The pacing is fantastic. The directing is great. Just love it.
Yeah, and just to double down on, like, I can see Bradley Cooper taking this role. I can also see Robert De Niro reading the script and saying, I'm okay. That's fine. Like, you really have to see the entire picture and believe in your director that this is going to be more than the words on the page. Like, the words on the page are fun, but there's a visual element that is just not going to be captured on the page. You're going to have to trust that I can deliver a really interesting experience, and for, De Niro to sign up for it and to do it all the way. Like, he really plays it to the bone. And I buy him as Carl Van Loon. As much as I see De Niro, I'm also seeing Carl Van Loon. It's so funny to watch last week, or a couple weeks ago, we did Heat, and seeing him play this, I don't know, that heist guy, smart, boss, and to watch his physicality. Like, there's that scene with Pacino where he's just he won't relent, and he's just kind of leaning both away and into him. Like, he's kind of shielding himself in the conversation. Like, his physicality is so good. And then watching him in this film where he's much bigger, like, he's making himself bigger because he's not worried about anything. He's open to the world because what can the world do to him? Like, he owns this place. Who are you to talk to me? And, the way he tries Eddie throughout the film, like, he's just putting him through his paces. Like, yeah, okay, everybody knows that. I know that. What are you telling me? Like, there's a cockiness that's just there as this rich tycoon. And De Niro did his homework. He showed up prepared, and he's delivering it. And it's so cool because this movie would not be the same without him. Like, I'm sure there's some other really good actors who could step in and do a fantastic job, but they wouldn't be De Niro, and he just adds so much weight to this movie. That's about a guy taking smart pills. That's just it's inspired casting and inspired accepting, by one of the best actors of our many generations. God, that's cool. Same. I didn't see this in theaters. I was backpacking through the Yucatan with my friend Regina, and we were looking for a movie to download and watch at some, backwood hotel. And she was like, what about this? I was like, yeah. I was not excited about it at all, but I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. It's Bradley Cooper, so how bad can it be? And we were just riveted. We're like, we kind of looked up halfway through the film. We're like, this is really fun. Like, yeah, I'm having a great time. And then we just kind of dialed it, watching it on her iPad. And it was just a fun, and I've gone back to this movie a bunch of times, probably every few years at least. But whenever it first came out, I got home from our trip, watched it again, and then was just like, these camera moves, what the hell? And tried to recreate it. And to a bad degree, I did. They make it look so easy because they obviously, worked on it. But it's very much what you said. Like, you're setting up 3 cameras, and I think the way they did it, he built some kind of stand that they could all be on the same level. But yeah, you're going to have your wide, your medium, and your long lens. And then in post, stitch them all together and try to keep them as, close together as you can to kind of keep the frames as close as you can, so that whenever you stitch them and overlay them, they don't look radically off. But yeah, then you're just, punching in and zooming in and then stitching in the next frame, then the next frame. Then you walk, 50 yards down the street, set it up, pop another several shots. And it's really inspired to just find the areas where you're going to find those stitch lines. And I'm just blown away that they had that idea and used it on the right project. That would be an easy thing to pull out and use it on the wrong project. But it fits so well with the story of his journey through his mind and through life. They use it in so many ways. It's not just a one-trick pony of, whenever he's taking this drug or he's thinking about suicide or he's thinking about, it fits all these occasions. And now it becomes a motif. And it helps us tell the story because, how did I get here? And it does have that kind of psychedelic, where time stops existing and the world is moving around you. It's such a genius idea. And I don't know if I've seen anyone use it since. Execution is not impossible, especially for people working on this kind of budget. But I would imagine it's really tempting. The closest I think we get is a hyperlapse, where people do something similar, but it's a very different technique, where you're, doing this stop motion kind of time lapse effect of, I'm going to pop a shot here, walk 5 feet, pop another shot. And then you stitch them together, in post, and you just fly through the city. That's a different thing because here you're seeing motion. You're seeing people walking around the city, cars driving by you, and it all feels seamless and in real time. And yet, they can speed it up, slow it down, whatever they want to do. God.
I mean, and anytime a camera goes through glass or perceived glass, I think is so amazing. And I know it's probably an easy thing to do, whatever. Maybe the glass isn't there and it's put in post. But there's that scene where he's walking down the street and he's still all disheveled and he looks at himself in the glass, and we zoom into the glass and you see reflections in the glass, but those reflections turn out to be hanging lights in the barber shop while he's getting a haircut. And then we zoom past multiple versions of him getting this haircut, and then we're in his apartment where he's writing his book and he's all put together and his hair is cut and everything. Just so cool. So cool. And that was one of the other times where they did this kind of fractal zoom thing that you're talking about that has nothing to do with him actively taking the pill. It's the process of him developing, right? And so we see multiple versions of him. It also happens again later when he has kind of the time shift or the time loss, and then he ends up on top of the bridge, and he's hurt his leg. After he fights all those guys in the subway, and then he goes in this bender all night, and we see all of that happening. We see multiple versions of him as well, again, and that happens multiple times throughout the film. And then he ends up on top of the bridge. Brilliant, just brilliant.
Because you can throw your character into any situation you want at that point. You don't have to explain anything. Why does he get into a fight in the subway with a dozen guys? Doesn't matter. This is just where he doesn't know. So we don't get to know either. And that's part of the fun of watching this character kind of deal with the ramifications of this drug. It's so, God, it's a really...
Do we ever find out if I think we know that he didn't kill the girl, but do we ever find out if he did or not? I don't remember.
To be honest, I keep forgetting.
Yeah, I want to say that he didn't. No, he definitely did not. Because
it the henchman?
We turn around in the hallway. He turns around and sees the henchman.
Okay.
And then we go into the bedroom and they start hooking up or whatever. But then we go somewhere else. But the fact that we just see the henchman there walking towards him, I think is enough to tell us that he didn't do it. But he's just not remembering that later on. He just remembers being with her.
Yeah.
So anyway. Yeah.
They do a great job of stacking up the stakes because it would be one thing to have him trying to battle Van Loon, tete-a-tete, but they're like, yeah, that's good. We could do more. How about a dead body? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's good. We could do more. How about a gangster, also wants the drug? Yeah, we could do more. How about his relationship? Let's put it all at stake. Let's throw it in his health. Like, they just stacked so many things against this guy. No matter what scene you're in, he's battling something, whether it's his own health, the thing that he wants in life, which is really his girlfriend, and success to some degree or another. Yeah, it's just never ending. Like, they piled up stakes on stakes on stakes, and it makes for a really fun ride. And that starts with that opening scene. And openers, how you start a film, it's kind of the promise that you're making with your audience. It sets the tone, it sets the expectations for what kind of experience we're going to have. And for this film, right, we start with Eddie on the edge of a fancy, tall high-rise. He's dressed to the nines, and there's this massive steel door that's being bludgeoned, and he's contemplating suicide. And then we see him fall off, think about falling off the building, and then we push into that cool visual infinite zoom thing. Like, you understand at a snap, like, okay, there's people trying to kill him, but why is he thinking about killing himself? Why doesn't he fight? Like, you don't understand all the context of that moment, which is what they want, right? They want to say, how to find myself in this situation? Well, let's rewind. Like, like you said, it's a classic storytelling technique of show some excitement and then back up and show the setup. But that opening, minute or whatever it is, it tells us something, that this is a roller coaster ride. This is not a deeply philosophical, intellectual exercise. This is about fun. And you get that vibe from that opening. Like, people are trying to kill this guy and he's thinking about dying. And then you have this voiceover that kicks on, right? It starts us deep into the story, and gives you a dramatic, crazy situation, hooks the viewer, like you said, with a promise that it's gonna get crazy. And we can also see the extent to what kind of crazy this world is going to offer. Like, we're not going to suddenly be flying around the city, with magic powers. It's like, oh no, in fact, quite the opposite. He might fall and die. He's not a superhuman. So we kind of see, get a feel for the boundaries of what we can expect in the story. And then we can rewind and get to the boring backstory, right? And the opening also gives us a need for the voiceover. Like, what's happening? Clue us in, give us something. And I think the voiceover is important because we're going to need it later when we're in his head, seeing how he arrives at certain decisions, explaining his powers and when he's struggling. Like, there's probably a version of this movie without any voiceover, and it kind of works, but not very well. You get a little lost, and you're like, okay, I kind of see that, where that happened. But having him there kind of coaching along is just a good use overall, right? It pops up to give us those insights, but also doesn't always give us too much. Like, they leave room for a little bit of audience engagement, but not too much space. So, like, he has that moment early on where he's like, and I met some new friends. They invited me to the beach. The beach was not nearby. Like, you could say they flew me to another country and it was really fun. Instead, just make this illusion, and then we get to see him board a flight and fly over the ocean. Like, he's kind of making a joke that we get to fill in the blank with, yeah, no kidding, y'all are on a private jet and like scooting over the Atlantic or whatever. And that's a nice way to give us a lot, but let us fill in the last 10%. Like, give us something to do. And they do a really good job of balancing that, because that's a really hard line to walk. And the movies that we all hate do them poorly.
Yeah.
But yeah, is this the best use of a voiceover like ever? No, but it's not a serious film, and it really lets us move through the story very quickly, through a lot of story, and keeping us entertained. Because yeah, we see him hook up with the landlord's wife, and she's making allusions to what they're doing, but we get to see it, we get to make a joke, and we also get to know, hey, I really did help her with her paper too. And it's like, okay, we're playing a lot. This is all play. But overall, the structure, the bones of this thing is really good because they set up a really nice problem. We have a struggling, broken writer, loses his girlfriend, can't write a single word. Man, if only there was an answer. Magic pill. Like, he bumps into his ex-wife's brother, and 7 minutes in, 3 minutes into that, he's popping the pill out. And then it's like, oh, cool. Well, let's see what happens. And then we get straight to like the benefits. Let's see all the fun first, right? Show us the addictive side. Money, women, the wit and intelligence, and holding audience with all these, well-to-do socialites and investment people. And he's out talking to them. And then we get to travel. We get new friends. We get this lifestyle. And then ultimately, very quickly, he arrives at, yeah, that's all fine. Like, he burns through all that fun within seconds and arrives at a new vision for his life. And it's not writing. And then he gets his girl back. Like, okay, that's really cool. We get why he really wants all this, this pill and this experience. But then let's get to the consequences, right? He goes into this fugue state, right? Memory loss, physical pain, and he's cheating on his girlfriend because later they get back together. And then in this fugue state, now he's cheating on her. And that girl ends up dead, like vomiting, headaches. And then, if that's not bad enough, he catches up with other users, or at least their family members, because they're all dead. And now you're really laying in like, okay, the consequences are getting worse and worse. And whenever he hears the symptoms, there's vomiting, and then there's death, Well, what do I do? Well, if he stops, we meet his ex-girlfriend or his ex-wife, Melissa. This is what happens when you stop cold turkey. Well, okay. But this is a new batch. Maybe your batch is better than mine. And so we have some hope, but not much. And so they do such a great job of structuring, pulling you in, giving us the high life, showing us the low life. And now we have a new problem that we need to solve. Very fun. And his book is a really interesting kind of segue into all of this. Because at the beginning, he's talking about, yeah, I'm a writer and no one believes me. And he's in this bar. It's so funny to watch him excitedly talk about a sci-fi novel in this rundown bar with two guys who don't look like they've cracked a book open since grade school. And he's just going on like, it's a sci-fi novel, but really it's my own personal manifesto about the plight of the individual in the 21st century. I sort of created a utopian society where we all sort of, it's really, and that's all he's got. Like we know he's got big ideas, but not a lot of, he's what you call all hat and no cattle. Like he's all ideas and no reality. But it also makes sense whenever he finally gets access to the pill, all those ideas get unlocked. So we're piecing all this together of a guy who's close, but also really far away. And then I love that whenever he goes to talk and he's having that conversation with his ex-brother-in-law, and the guy, Vernon, he's like, tell me about your book. And he tries to muster his life for like all of a half a second before he's like spilling his guts instead. I got nothing. I haven't written a single word. Like, I suck. I'm the worst. And it's so beautiful because it to me, it's playing with the rule of repeats. We've already seen him BS his buddies at the bar. Now let's see him be honest. Like, what do you really have? Squat. And then he takes the pill. And I love this little section because delivering the book is a whole kind of impossible problem. Hey, let's see what kind of book a genius writes. Show us. It's like whenever a movie is saying, we're going to write the best song in the world. Well, now you got to play that song. And the audience has to believe, an audience who's familiar with songs has to believe you just made the best song in the world. And go ahead and make that song for us all. We'll all watch and then judge you for how bad the song is. And what do you do? Well, for them, it's beautiful. We're going to show him punching the keys, music and light and letters and words are just falling all around him. Then we're going to let him deliver it to his agent, who's guffawing at him writing anything. And then we're going to let his agent leave a bunch of messages going crazy for it. We never actually need any details on the greatest story ever told. We just get reactions from an expert. And the expert's going crazy, and that's enough to convince us he did good. good job, Eddie. You know, it's like, we're done. We can move on. And I love that, you know, solution to a really shitty problem. Like, you want to show how smart someone is. Like, Good Will Hunting does this in spades of like navigating how smart Will is by giving context to that. And for him, he's kind of going through this world having to find ways to prove how smart he is. And we have to create these scenarios where it just kind of keeps getting leveled up, right? He's fine. He can outtalk his agent, but can he outtalk the whole other area that he's not an expert in, investment? Okay, well, you can do the dum-dums at the basement level. What about the tycoon? Okay, cool. Let's keep challenging him with more and more. And they do a great job of that. Exposition-wise, they layer in pretty nicely, actually. This is a really well-written movie for, you know, kind of the thrill ride that it is, because they'll give exposition for dum-dums, like whatever, me, and it's after his bender and dead body escapade, right? He's been in this fugue state and he kind of wakes up and he's terrified. He's like, I don't want to go through that again. I'm not taking any more pills. I'm done. And he doesn't know what's going on the night before, but he knows he doesn't want to do this anymore. And he gets that phone call from his ginger-headed friend that hooked him up with Van Loon, which that guy does a great job at. And he gets to sit in multiple scenes and navigate multiple scenes with Bradley Cooper and Robert De Niro. Like, well done, man. Like, that had to be living the life. It's not like I day played for one day. It was like, that's probably a couple weeks of work popping up and like, oh, hey, Bobby. Hey, Brad. like you're on first name. And he kills it. Like, he's not supposed to be a memorable character. We remember him just enough to let the story function. And that's it. And so this guy calls him after this bad night, and it sets up a really crystal clear issue. And because Eddie gets on the phone, he's like, I can't make the meeting. I'm not feeling well. And the guy's like, what are you talking? You're going to ruin everything. You're going to ruin me, because we need a reason for him to still participate in this world. And so we have this very quick conversation that really doesn't do anything else. Pull yourself together, get down to the meeting. Okay. Like, and that's it. Like, he just gets down to the meeting. It's otherwise a completely pointless call with no effect on the plot. Like, whether or not he goes to the meeting is still a decision that he has to make, but we need to feel like he needs to go there. We need to feel him pushed into that meeting, or otherwise you're like, why would you step into a bear trap willingly? Like, oh, okay, let's give him a little push and pull there. But then, so that's exposition for dum-dums. Like, we kind of need that. It doesn't do much, but it gives us enough to believe and go with the story. But there's also, I think, some exposition for smarties, which I did not catch. So he's doing that little spiel during that montage. And this is really actually just a montage movie. The entire movie is one big montage, which is great because there's so much going on that we're okay with it. We plop down in the few scenes and then we move along for 10 scenes and then we plop down again. But he's in this sequence of experiencing the high life, and he's talking to his new redheaded friend about like when to call it quits. And this guy's like, yeah, but you know, people know when to say when, kind of thing. And he's like, no. We're wired to overreach. Think back at every empire you ever known. Whoever said like, okay, we're good. No, thanks. Hey, let's live off the interest. And the guy's, yeah, you know, you got a good part. There's no brakes on greed or like whatever. And so they segue that into beforehand. If you think about him taking $800, turning that into $2,000, and he says it's not enough. It wasn't fast enough, and he goes and gets $100,000 from a gangster. Like, if you're really as smart as you say you are, you understand compound math, like compound interest, and how that works, and how doubling every 4 days gets astronomical after a couple of weeks. Like, you would be smart enough to not get involved with a gangster, right? If you're so good at math, doubling your money every 4 days is a far better advantage than the possible fallout of dealing with someone who's violent, right? It would only be 3 weeks before he got well over $100,000 in returns. But he does go on to say that we're wired to overreach. And I think that's telling us, Yeah, if he had been patient enough for 3 weeks, he could have done that. But he's wired for something else, and he's doing things that are outside of being reasonable. Like, he's not a reasonable person anymore. And his girlfriend points that out. She levels the hammer on him. He was like, yeah, but what you did saved your life. And she's like, but that's not who I am. And so there's a nice kind of tension about what drugs can do for you versus finding a way to still be true to yourself. And the other kind of fun thing about his book is it points to who he really is, because he has some kind of personal manifesto about society and culture, right? The plight of the individual in the 21st century. I created a utopian society. And so he's got these big ambitions about humanity. And I think that is also just an expositional hat tip for what he's actually trying to do with being senator and ultimately president. Like, he's got a vision for society and humanity that he wants to help people. And that's who he really is. And I think that's kind of the marriage, because otherwise I find a really hard time buying in that Lynn still wants to be with him, because he's still on the drugs. How do they win her back? And it's by weaning off and ultimately convincing her that what I'm doing is going to help society and humanity. That is who I am. That book that I wrote, that you fell in love with, that's who I really am. And if you give me time, I'll show it to you. And so you get to the end of the film, you can go one of two ways of like, oh yeah, she's a gold digger, which is not what you get, the vibe that you get from her. Or she sees that old him still in him. And that's why it's so good to have her back at the end of the film, because it's like, yeah, this show that he's putting on isn't about power grabbing. It's about something deeper and more personal, philosophical, if you will.
And he hasn't reached that president level yet. We're catching him on the rise up. We're seeing the potential of where he's going, so we can see his motivation for getting there instead of just him being there already.
Yeah.
And also, it's a great way to bring De Niro's character back in to try to blackmail him, right, on his way up.
Yeah.
So we can see his response to being blackmailed, and we can hear him say, "I'm off of it," so that we know that, so that when we see him with her later, his dinner date or his lunch date, we see him with her later, we know that she knows that he's off of it, that he can speak. What was it, Chinese or whatever? Korean. He can speak Chinese, and to the waiter, and she just looks at him, and he's like, this is me now. Like I have, whatever. And we know that. I will say two things really quickly. The story is so perfectly woven and cut together. It's just a masterclass. The first thing is mentioning his girlfriend when she dumps him, mentioning his ex-wife. It's a passing tone. It's almost a throwaway thing, but it turns out to be a big part of the movie, because he runs into his ex-brother-in-law who gives him the drug. And then later on, he meets with his ex-wife who is sick from getting off the drug after 2 years. She hasn't been on the drug for 2 years, and she's still like just destroyed. And it's somebody that he's very connected to. They were married, right? So he cares about her, and he has to want to see her. Like, I need to see you. And she has to want to not. And so there's this push and pull between people that he cares about. And that's fantastic. It's not just, oh, I used to go to school with this guy and I haven't seen him in forever, which is the normal thing.
Yeah, it is. Yep.
It's the normal thing. Oh, I haven't seen you since high school. How you doing? No, you were my brother-in-law. And not only that, he didn't really have a good relationship with him anyway. It was like, he mentions, I barely knew him, or I barely saw him, or had a relationship with him, but he's wanting to strike up a conversation and have a drink with me. Like, this is really weird and awkward. But then later on too, and this is a big one for me. I think it was super cool, was towards the end when the gangster's about to kill him, right? And Bradley, or his character, loses the last pill, right? Loses the last pill. There is no more pill, right? And we're sitting here wondering, how is he going to get out of this? This guy is on the drug, and he doesn't have the drug. He has no way to even collect himself. He's coming off of it. He is in withdrawal at the same time. So not only does he not have it, so he can't think his way out, but he's in withdrawal, so he's weak. What's he going to do? And he stabs him, right? And then the exposition of the voiceover tells us, oh, the last bit of NTZ or whatever it is in his bloodstream as the blood puddle is coming towards him. And we know exactly what he needs to do. And we're thinking as viewers, oh God, don't do that. Oh, don't do that. Oh, come on. But what else is he going to do? So of course he does it, but he has to inject it. We have to see the gangster inject it to know that it's in his bloodstream. Because otherwise, if he takes a pill, sure, it'll eventually get in his bloodstream, right? It has to in order to get into his brain. But for him to mention, oh, you're taking it wrong. You need to do this. You need to because then it's immediate. And not only is it immediate, you get 100% of it. And then for them to mention being in his bloodstream and then drinking the blood, it's just a masterful setup to me.
It really is. And the way that it moves, every time, I watched it twice, and the second time after having watched this a dozen other times, watching him drink that blood was still like, oh God, don't, please. Oh, it's so...
and that's the color of blood.
You're right.
It's dark.
Deep.
It's almost black.
Yeah.
Yes. So anyway.
But yeah, and the other... They whip through so much story and they keep moving. They never give you time to sit and think. And I love that aspect of this because there's to think that Eddie, taking this pill is smarter about the medicine, or this gangster taking this pill is smarter about the drug than the doctors who also worked and designed and took this drug. That's such a stretch. Like, there's no way they would be able to figure this thing out better than doctors who well understand dosing, and protocols and delivery systems. Like, that's insane. But you never get time to sit and chew on that. It's not about that at all. It's all about how is this guy going to outsmart everyone around him? And you're just along for the ride. And so it's smart that they don't take too much time trying to make this more than it is, because you still need a huge, jump of suspension of disbelief. And the more you try to make this grounded, the more it will backfire. Like, don't give us that time. Keep moving, keep going. And I love it for that. Yeah. My last thoughts, cinematography wise, 3 or 4 minutes. Obviously great use of color. I mean, my God, when he's off NZT, right? Everything's drab, it's desaturated, it's dark and cloudy, right? They had these vignettes after he's taken the drug and he's off it now. They heavily vignette the image. And so it's just really cloudy. And then when he's on NZT, obviously highly saturated, everything's clear, it's bright, a little bit more exposed, and just feels good. Like, oh yeah, I want to live like this. Of course I do. But it's just a quick, easy visual reference to know whenever he's on it versus off it. Like, that's perfect storytelling mechanism to make sure the audience is always with you. Without that, this is a hella confusing movie because now you're just asking the audience, in your mind's eye, imagine he's seeing and feeling the world differently. Like, no, let's show the audience what he's thinking and feeling and seeing. And part of that is the voiceover giving us those mental insights. But it's also, when you're doing this, necessitating way more coverage, right? All these inserts of what he's seeing, all these POV shots. It's just going to take way more work and thought of how to stitch these ideas together. So the editing blends beautifully with the cinematography, with the visual effects. Like, Neil Berger outdid himself because all these things flow and fit together. Yeah, this, how did I know that? Oh, this textbook that I saw on a table while I was trying to sleep with a TA who's studying legal or whatever. And they take that snapshot of the book cover, the text, and then let it float over into the new scene over his face. And that's 3 things happening. That's performance, obviously, of the realization once the text gets there, but it's also the VFX composite that's then blending into a cinematography move, a camera move, where you're just panning over right to left until you line him up perfectly in the frame, and then you can fade it out and then let him react. Like those all are just, that's your director making sure everyone gets it, what's going on inside his head. And so cool. It's just masterful directing by far. Also really love cinematography wise, this inverted shot that they do. So many films are doing these inverted shots that don't mean anything. It's just there to be cool. Stop being cool, start being thoughtful. And here it's such a great, cool, thoughtful shot. Whenever he walks out of that meeting with Van Loon and he's feeling ill and he throws up, he walks right by the camera as it flips upside down and inverts, and he vomits. And it's so cool. Also, not just because it's, showing us how his world is being turned upside down, but because, and that he's disoriented, but the vomit itself is going up. And that's interesting visually, but it also implies that it's going to fall right back down on top of him. He hasn't escaped anything yet. There's so much interesting visual storytelling happening through this one shot. It's just a very deliberate use of a really cool shot that most people aren't doing anymore. They use it in the most humdrum of ways. And this was a beautiful, thoughtful execution of an idea. Neil Berger, well done, man. And then another great cinematography thing that I think we can all use when done, I don't know, somewhat thoughtfully. You don't even got to be that thoughtful, honestly, is using inserts as storytelling. So Eddie goes after his first day on NZT and he's off it again. He's like, I need more. And he goes to visit his ex-brother-in-law, Vernon. And Vernon is like, I'm not having a hot day. How about you run some errands for me? And then we cut to all these inserts. We don't see Eddie once. We just see the things that he's doing, right? It's a door swinging and hitting a bell. It's dry cleaning running on a belt. It's food being cooked and bagged. And then he's back in the same hallway we just left him in, right? But now he's got dry cleaning and food. And that's so good because they have so many setups to get through on this movie. Like, it's outrageous. I'd love to see what their shooting schedule looked like because it had to have been grabbing what you can grab when you can grab it, right? Thoughtfully, because you also got to know where it's fitting in your edit. Like the DP, the director, and the AD were all just mind melding like mofos.
I just love that they don't take any time. Like, we don't need to see him walking down the street, to see him walking into the dry cleaners. It's just aspects of it, and now we're back.
And we're back. It saves a ton of time on your setups, and it's more visually interesting because close-ups are just way easier to light and shoot than these wide shots. You want to shoot a wide shot of someone walking into the counter, walking up to the counter into the laundromat. Like, you got to light that whole room. But if you're going to shoot a close-up of the dry cleaning, set up 1 or 2 lights, flag, and you're done in like 15 minutes. Okay, now you don't need people to hit their lines. You don't even need audio. You could do that MOS without any, audio at all, because you're going to do that in post. Like, you can just start popping those shots off left and right. Same thing with the cook. You just go in and pop a few lights up, and you're seeing this guy cook. The dirtier the better, because he's off NZT, so make it gritty and grimy. Okay, cool. We got that shot. And we're moving on. Like, it's so much faster. And it's also more interesting. It's more fun. Like, it's just a perfect execution of an idea that also helps your production. And also love that it plays directly into the plot. His ex-brother-in-law is kind of a dirtbag. So of course he's going to send Eddie to do these menial tasks, right? Food. And then while he's out doing this menial thing, it helps the story move along because Eddie got killed in the interim. And now, Vernon got killed in the interim. And Eddie can now not find the pills, which is clearly what these people were looking for. And so his realization is that he went for food because Vernon doesn't cook. And because Vernon doesn't cook, I now have an idea that the people who looted this place don't have. The best hiding place is the one place that he never goes, the oven. So I'm going to go check the oven and here's my bag. Like that's another one of those subtle expositional elements that you may not catch, and it doesn't really matter. But it's there. The layers are there for being, thought through by the writer. It's like there's a reason they couldn't find it, and there's a reason that he can. And it all ties into also when Eddie gets killed, like, and what this guy's doing. Like, it's very tightly connected. It's great storytelling, man. That's all I got, bro. It's a fun ride,
just
bro.
That?
Just that. It's a very fun ride. And if you're making a popcorn movie, you can certainly do worse than studying this one, I think.
Agreed. It has a lot of things in here that most of the time don't work for guys like us.
Yeah.
It's got voiceover. It's got exposition. Well, I mean, those two things, specifically, like voiceover and exposition. It has a lot of stuff that, you come to expect in stories where you start, like I mentioned before, you start in one place, you go backwards, and then you come meet where you started, and then you continue on. That kind of stuff where you kind of expect that. I know what's going to happen. I know he's going to be a loser. He's going to take this drug, and then it's going to be, make a lot of money and be successful. I know that. But I don't know all these little things in between. And that's where I think that this movie is really amazing, and that Neil Berger is just a master. And Leslie Dixon is incredible screenplay writer, because the story is in the little things in between. Yes, you have the big sweeping things that happen, of course, but the little things, like we mentioned about, him being married before and running into his ex-brother-in-law dying, and then him finding the pills in his own way of thinking his way out of it. And then the little things that happen in between of him meeting his redheaded friend guy, just happened to be impressed by him at a party, like these, which then gets him to Carl Van Loon. So it's everything leading into the next thing, but not knowing how you're going to get there.
Yeah.
It's the how you get there that makes it really super cool, not necessarily where you get to, right? I think maybe stories try to do too much.
Mm-hmm.
I'm me as a viewer, I'm not looking for everything new all the time. I'm really not. I'm okay with a story that I've been told before. It's the how I get there. Yeah. It's the journey, not the destination, that's super interesting to me. And that's why I think this movie has legs 13, 14 years later, because of how we get there. And, obviously you have Bradley Cooper and Robert De Niro next to each other, and it's just fantastic because of that. But I would venture to a weird scenario where neither of them are in this movie. But you have you have two other great actors, and I think that the story itself would hold up, because it'd just be interesting because of all the things that happen, because this happens, then this happens. It's just, yeah. So I think the journey that we go on is fulfilling, and it's told very quickly, which keeps me engaged. I mean, I couldn't look away, and I've seen this movie like you a dozen times.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah.
Dude, I love it. Nice. So what are you going to recommend this week?
I am going to stick with another Bradley Cooper film, and I can't believe we haven't covered this, but I'm going to recommend American Hustle, which is just a great, I love that movie. The acting in it is fantastic. The writing is amazing. The story itself is a lot of fun. So American Hustle.
Nice. David O. Russell. I'm trying to think if we've covered any of his films. I'm a big fan of the way he likes to shoot scenes. He does, 360 lighting that really lets the actors run through the space and do whatever they want. Great recommendation. I'm going to recommend a new film that's out called Better Man. I didn't realize this was based on a actual person. I forgot his name. Robbie Williams. So that guy, he's a musician of some kind, and I don't know. You don't have to know who this guy is. Maybe it's better or worse, depending if you do. But the visual effects are outstanding, and it's kind of like Limitless in the sense of it's a ride. Like there's some really fun sequences that I think for a movie theater experience were really fun. And it was frying my brain. It was almost too much. I felt like I was, on cocaine, like running through a jungle or something. It was just like, what is happening around me right now? It was just a lot to take in. But very fun. It's the musical story about with the monkey or the ape, whatever he is. And it's fun. It's a really fun experience. And the visual effects are, 9 out of 10. Like they're just absolutely, beautiful. And so stay tuned for next week. I thought it would be fun to do a back-to-back look at Tarsem Singh. So we'll look at The Cell next week. That's the Jennifer Lopez one. Sorry, she's in that. We'll see if that's a good or a bad thing. I can't remember how much I liked or didn't like The Cell. I remember I liked the experience when it came out because it's visually one of the most stunning films ever. But I don't know if that makes for a good movie. It'll be cool to look at, if nothing else. But then after that, we'll cover The Fall, because that is also one of the most beautiful movies ever made. And so that would be fun just to see Tarsem Singh go back to back. And I don't know, see how that goes. So stay tuned for The Cell next week. And if you're enjoying the show, don't forget, subscribe, drop us a review. And if you wanted to leave a comment on this episode, you can do that at thepestlepodcast.com/limitless.
And our quote of the day is from Stephen Wolfram. What will limit us is not the possible evolution of technology, but the evolution of human purposes.
It's a pretty cool idea. Like, at what point does Eddie Morra say, okay, what do I do now? Like, he's using a technology that's enhancing all his abilities, and that's where we're going as a society. Like, whether or not it comes in a pill or something else, or it's just the tools that we use, like AI or something. But yeah, what do we do then? Like, the evolution of humanity is going to be very directly tied to how much purpose we give ourselves. And it's an interesting question to ponder that I think we're all wrestling with, of what comes next. There's the hard times that we're, I think, kind of going through right now, the economy and like, where do we fit in the society where AI is starting to replace things. Those are hard questions, but ultimately we have to ask the bigger questions too, about where does this all go? What do we really want to be doing with our lives? Because a century ago, that wasn't much of a question. It wasn't a fun question, because what we want to do is eat. Like, we want to have food on the table. And then 50 years ago, it's like, what do I want to do with my life? Because, we have grocery stores that deliver magically all this stuff for us now. And now I can think about what do I want to do with my life, Mom? I don't have to be a doctor, do I? And we don't have to be doctors and lawyers anymore in order to have a good life. I don't know. It's fun to think about, and it's fun to think that it's fun to think about, that we have that option to think about it, I don't know. It just struck me I looked up, like, who is interesting. Oh, I haven't ever seen anything from Stephen Wolfram, who's like a computer scientist and I think physicist or something. He's just a brainiac kind of guy. That's all I got.
Well, and our motivations are what get us up in the morning to develop new technologies or a new creative vision, or just to do whatever it is that we want to do or need to do. We have to have specific motivations. So that could be just to put food on the table, or it could be something else. It could be, developing a cure for cancer, things like that. So if we don't have a motivation or a purpose, then technology doesn't happen. Like why build AI unless you have a motivation to, I don't know what people's motivation is to build AI. I don't think it's to take away jobs necessarily. I think it's really just to like push humanity forward, or to build something new. Maybe I don't know, or to.
It's very Jurassic Park in that way, isn't it?
Yeah, I really don't know what the motivation is, but people have their motivation. It exists because of that. So, yeah, I think for me, it's just every day, if I'm, when I wake up, I'm trying to ask myself that purpose. Like, why am I awake today? Today, I'm having this conversation with you about this film that I'm really enjoying. And then I'm going to go play with my kids. Like, that's my motivation. Tomorrow, might be different. But yeah, I think it's really interesting little quote there. And we all have to ask ourselves what our purpose is every day. Just a reminder that can change, and that's okay. But
Yeah, absolutely. Well said, man.
yeah. Great quote. Well, hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. I know I did. I loved rewatching this film after so many years. Just fantastic. Neil Berger, please make more of this kind of stuff. Yeah. Please subscribe, review us wherever you get your podcast, share us with your friends. It all helps a whole lot. And if there's a film that you'd like to see us pick apart, talk about, share it with us. Who knows? Maybe one day we'll cover it. Until next time, I'm Todd.
I'm Wes.
Go watch the movies.